Good evening and welcome to the opening dinner of the 9th IISS Manama Dialogue Regional Security Summit, held under the patronage of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of the Kingdom of Bahrain, First Deputy Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, Sheikh Salman bin Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. Allow me to thank the Kingdom of Bahrain for its support to the international defense and foreign affairs diplomacy that lies at the heart of the IISS Manama Dialogue Regional Summit process. Our collective efforts should, wherever possible, be directed to resolve conflict, establish peaceful relations, and nurture reconciliation. In the last day, we have learned of the death of a great leader who fought for justice and dignity. He once said, "I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended." In honor and in memory of Nelson Mandela's long life, please could you stand for a minute's silence. Thank you. All of us look forward to a debate at this Manama Dialogue that properly examines the issues of the moment while taking stock of what policies can be collectively generated to provide enduring solutions to the challenges of the day. This Manama Dialogue convenes at the end of a calendar year that has seen dramatic change in the region and the wider world. Often it has been difficult for governments and private actors to shape rather than be shaped by events. The IISS, in its annual strategic survey, dubbed 2013 the year of living tactically. The speed of events, particularly in the Middle East, initially invited declarative responses that were often not supported by action on the ground, or tactical reactions that were not guided by a strategic plan. This year has brought into striking relief the wisdom of Chinese strategist Sun Tzu's famous axiom, "Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." The IISS Middle East office here in Bahrain, which is an international office, not just a regional office, has been active this year to inspire strategic thinking on a number of important subjects. We have a strong program of work on geoeconomics and security and have engaged hundreds of government leaders and businesses over the year in our workshop activity. Our cybersecurity program is based here. We have worked closely with many GCC governments and analysts to think through the public policy issues of the cyber domain. We are building a program on GCC military cooperation, and we hope that we will engage directly many of the military establishments represented at this Manama Dialogue. In our general international relations work, we have involved analysts from Europe, North America, Latin America, Asia, and Africa in our activity here in Bahrain. so as to ensure that our strategic analysis is informed by the best of regionally rooted thinking. An international perspective with a local understanding is the blend that we want to bring to strategic thinking. Now is the time for the best analysis to fuel the best public policy. This gathering of foreign ministers, defense ministers, national security advisors, defense chiefs, parliamentarians, analysts, and strategists is designed to fuse considered thinking with deliberate diplomacy. This weekend, we will be discussing issues such as the conflict in Syria, the role of outside powers in the region, the nature of regional security architecture, and in particular, the role of the GCC, the techniques and current requirements for effective mediation and astute intervention to build security in the region, the international dimension of Middle East security, and the need for satisfactory non-proliferation approaches, the dangers of extremism and sectarian politics, the changing energy markets in Middle East security, and the shifting regional balance and its impact on stability. In all these debates, we intend to embark from fact-based analysis to inspire imaginative and long-term policies. It is always best, in the evening before we begin these proceedings, to have the analysis and perspectives of a person who is a principal actor on the strategic scene. The United Kingdom has had a long engagement with this part of the world and with this country. It is a relationship that is now deepening and widening, and in every sense is being modernized. While the UK is not and does not seek to be the power it once was, it is still one of the few great extrovert states in the world. Its disposition is to look outwards and to be a shaper, not just a surfer of global trends. The Right Honourable William Hague MP, Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs in the UK, in 5 years as Shadow and 3 years as Foreign Secretary, has long been a champion of the extrovert approach. He has said that the United Kingdom should not suffer from strategic shrinkage. He has also said that a purpose of UK foreign policy is to seek an influence that flows rather than a power that jars. Recently, there is no subject in the Middle East, including all those that are on this weekend's agenda, with which the UK has not been involved. As a friend of the IISS, a long-time supporter of the Manama Dialogue process, and as an elegant advocate of international engagement, I am delighted warmly to welcome William Hague to the podium to give us a keynote address for the 2013 Manama Dialogue.
Well, Your Royal Highnesses, my fellow ministers, Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here. I think, for me, the 7th Manama Dialogue that I have attended, and I'm very grateful to John, to the IISS, and to the government of Bahrain, the Kingdom of Bahrain, for bringing us all together once more. And I particularly want to thank, at the beginning, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Bahrain, who last year gave a speech here at this gathering in which he was very warm and complimentary about the relationship between Bahrain and the United Kingdom. And I want to return the compliment tonight. You, Your Royal Highness, have our warm and sincere respect, not only as a great friend of the United Kingdom, but also for your leadership in your own country, as you, His Majesty, and your colleagues work to build the long-term stability that Bahrainis deserve. We will be a staunch friend to you, supporting the sustained, comprehensive reform you're seeking and calling on all sides to play a constructive role in political dialogue. The relationship between the UK and Bahrain is historic. It goes back nearly 200 years to the East India Company in 1816. It is deep, since thousands of British nationals call this country their home, and it has a great future with new areas of cooperation developing all the time, such as the affinity between London as a global financial capital and Bahrain as a major center of Islamic finance. One of our first decisions as a government, a new government in Britain in May 2010, was to reinvigorate British diplomacy in the Gulf and to reverse what we saw as the neglect by previous ministers of crucial relationships. It's my strong view that the UK and other Western countries must retain and also strengthen our commitment to stability in the Gulf. We demonstrate that commitment here in Bahrain, where, thanks to your hospitality, our Royal Air Force has flown from your skies for 70 years. Our Royal Navy has patrolled in these waters for nearly 80 years. British minesweepers, some of the most advanced in the world, are stationed here now, ready at all times to confront threats to the security of this region. We are extending our cooperation on defense and security with countries in the Gulf deliberately and for the long term, encompassing cybersecurity and counterterrorism, as well as our armed forces working together. We will remain solidly committed to intensifying and building up these links based on common interests and the deepest possible mutual understanding. Today in Britain, we now have far greater consultation with governments in this region on foreign policy, many more visits in all directions, and a much more coherent effort to build up our economic links. Our bilateral trade in goods with the Gulf has increased 30% in the last 2 years alone. So many people characterize the Middle East as a region of problems, but we know it as a region of immense achievement and opportunity as well. And that is why, for instance, we supported Dubai's bid to host the World Expo 2020, and I want to congratulate His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, who is here tonight, for the stunning and inspiring campaign won by Team Dubai. In fact, you should give them a round of applause. Our stronger emphasis on the Gulf is part of our wider foreign policy in which we are building up and expanding Britain's global presence. We are opening up to 20 new embassies. We are forging new ties with emerging powers. We are rediscovering old friendships. We are strengthening our Foreign Office and placing renewed emphasis on diplomacy and conflict prevention. We remain at the forefront of the vital discussions in the United Nations Security Council, where we will look forward after tonight's vote to working with Jordan, and I congratulate our Jordanian friends on their election to the Security Council. Indeed, 2013 has been a year in which the importance and the value of diplomacy has been fully demonstrated. Together this year, we have done our utmost to turn the wheels of diplomacy on the Middle East peace process, on Syria, and on Iran, all of which have been seized up and immobilized for years, and in the case of Iran, for nearly a decade. Of course, we all have different ways of contributing to these efforts and our own constraints when we do so. But that doesn't stop the overall impact we achieve together from making a huge difference. The ups and downs of decision-making in our own countries, such as in our own fierce parliamentary debate over Syria in August, do not stop us playing our part in turning these diplomatic wheels, nor should the controversies of any particular moment be thought of as a change in strategic direction. My message tonight is that having got these wheels turning after immense effort by so many countries in 2013, we must put our shoulders to them and keep them moving strongly in 2014. First of all, 2014 must be the year in which the promise of a two-state solution is brought decisively within reach. I pay tribute to Secretary Kerry for his outstanding leadership in making the resumption of negotiations possible, and to President Abbas and to Prime Minister Netanyahu for having the courage to begin the process. Now it must not be allowed to falter, for if it does, and facts on the ground continue to be created, then the possibility of a two-state solution could be gone forever. Courage and decisiveness is called for by both sides, and European Union and Arab nations must be ready to play our part in providing the incentives needed to reach a settlement. Second, we must make 2014 the year in which we turn the corner on the conflict in Syria. The agreements to eradicate Syrian chemical weapons and to set a date for the Geneva II Peace Conference on the 22nd of January have opened up a chink of light. Ending the Syria conflict will be an extraordinarily difficult task. It requires the parties themselves to decide themselves that they have more to gain from negotiating than from fighting. But we have to try to make this a decisive year, because if we don't, we could face a humanitarian crisis of potentially unmanageable proportions. If current trends continue, over 4 million Syrian people could be refugees by the end of next year. That would mean a fifth of the population of the entire country out of its borders, ever more deaths, greater damage to Syrian society, more pain for women and minorities, and an even greater mountain to climb in ending the conflict. As it is, the international community is not keeping pace with this crisis. The UN appeal for Syria is 40% underfunded now and is about to be increased again. We in the UK have donated £500 million in humanitarian aid, and I call on other countries to play their full part at the donor conference in Kuwait in the middle of January. Moreover, if the conflict continues on its current trajectory, Syria itself could disintegrate, and with extremism growing, create ungoverned space in the heart of the Middle East, as well as further refugees and a greater risk from terrorism. Syria's neighbors would be in the front line of such a catastrophic deterioration in the conflict, but it would pose a serious potential threat to security in other parts of the world, including in Europe. Faced by these risks of the destruction of Syria and a regional humanitarian catastrophe, a political solution is overwhelmingly in the interests of the Syrian people and of the world. It would enable Syrians to unite and reclaim their country from those who are hijacking this conflict. It would create the basis for the recovery of Syrian society, with its roots in antiquity and its strong traditions of secularism and tolerance. It would mean the international community could put its resources into helping to rebuild Syria, rather than simply mitigating the refugee crisis without ever ending it. Because success ultimately depends on the parties themselves, pressure to make Geneva work needs to come from inside Syria, as well as outside Syria. So on the 22nd of January, both the regime and the opposition have to go to Geneva ready to make the necessary compromises to start to negotiate an end to the conflict on the basis of last year's Geneva communiqué, the establishment of a transitional governing body with full executive powers, made up from regime and opposition, formed by mutual consent, which makes it inconceivable, by the way, that Assad and his close associates could play any role in the future of Syria. And third, 2014 should be the year in which we implement the joint action plan we have agreed with Iran and succeed in negotiations on a comprehensive agreement. We recognize and welcome the change in tone and substance from the Iranian government on the nuclear issue. And in my dealings with him, Foreign Minister Zarif has been sincere in his desire to reach a diplomatic agreement. We have to test the power of diplomacy to the full. The alternatives are Iran's nuclear program proceeding on its current path, or a serious risk of conflict with unknowable consequences for this region. What we agreed in Geneva last month was a strong interim agreement that halts and in some respects rolls back Iran's nuclear program in return for limited sanctions relief, and it sets out the principles of a final comprehensive agreement. It is only a first step, and we understand why some people have concerns. But it is undoubtedly a significant step towards enhancing the security of the whole Middle East. It is absolutely vital now that we ensure that the monitoring and implementation is strictly upheld on all sides, that we maintain the rigor of the bulk of sanctions that remain, so that Iran has every incentive to reach a comprehensive agreement, and that we work hard on finding the solutions that will ensure that Iran does not build nuclear weapons and that its neighbors and the international community can trust the arrangements that will be put in place. I assure you that the agreement with Iran does not for us in the UK imply any diminution in our commitments to our alliances in the region, or to the security of its vital sea lanes, or to the struggle against terrorism. engagement on the nuclear question should not mean a free pass for Iran on other issues in the region. Of course, none of these three issues should distract us from the wider challenges in the Middle East. In Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, and Yemen, achieving stable political and economic reform, including representative and accountable governments, could be the work of a generation in some cases. The sickening attack in Yemen yesterday illustrated the extent of the security challenge. Those who aim to destabilize Yemen's political transition must not be allowed to succeed. We have to continue to help our Yemeni friends through this in the future, showing the same spirit of cooperation between the Gulf and the West, and going with the grain of local leadership and ideas. And I pay tribute to the work of the GCC and the leadership of Saudi Arabia in making the progress that we have made in Yemen in recent years. There is no alternative to the slow, painstaking process of building up independent institutions, creating economic opportunity, and improving human rights and political participation in all these countries. We will continue to give practical support to those countries that have experienced revolution while respecting those changing through evolution. This region of immense economic and social opportunity, a future powerhouse of the world, can only shine brighter if these wheels of diplomacy turn. So we must hope to make 2014 a year in which we turn the corner on the Syria conflict, bring a two-state solution to the Middle East peace process within reach, and make every effort to negotiate a comprehensive settlement with Iran on its nuclear program. If we do all of these things, then we will widen the chink of light that I spoke of earlier and make a hugely significant impact on the future prospects, not just for this region and all our friends in it, but for the peace and security of the whole world. Thank you very much indeed.
Foreign Secretary, thank you so much for inviting us to think of 2014 as a year of potentially vitally important strategic accomplishment. The Foreign Secretary has kindly agreed to take a few questions, and those of you who might wish to put a question might raise your hand, and I will arrange for a microphone to migrate in your direction. I will, as I catch people's eyes, take the liberty of asking the first, which is to invite the Foreign Secretary to comment on a short, medium, and long-term issue. The short-term issue is if he could describe to us what he sees as the principal risks in the implementation of this 6-month interim agreement with Iran. The medium-term question is to ask him to comment on how wide a comprehensive agreement could realistically be arrived at with the Islamic Republic of Iran once the interim agreement is satisfactorily concluded. And finally, on the longer term, can he imagine a path whereby Iran is happily and constructively integrated with this region and with the wider international community? Foreign Secretary.
Right, thank you, John, for saying you would have the first question and then having three all in one go, all of which, of course, are immense as well as immensely important questions. And I think on the short-term question, what are the risks in the implementation of the agreement with Iran? Well, clearly there's a huge amount of detail to be implemented. This agreement requires the forming of a joint commission between the E3+3 and Iran. It requires the IAEA to be able to do more than they're doing today. It lays down in detail many of the things that Iran has to do. And so, for instance, on the Iraq heavy water reactor, it is very specific. Iran will not transfer fuel to the reactor. Iran will not test more fuel for the reactor. Iran will not install any remaining components into the reactor. Now, of course, there is a big challenge in making sure that these things actually happen to the satisfaction of all concerned. And any loss of confidence in these things happening would, of course, be disastrous for the agreement. So there is a lot of administrative work to do to start the 6-month period going. Sanctions relief in the US and EU has to be coordinated with Iranian readiness to embark on this 6-month agreement, and then all the implementation has to be overseen in detail. At any time, that could go wrong. And that is if we want to look at it from the risk point of view, those are some of the risks. How wide a comprehensive agreement can be negotiated? Well, I think it will be if anything, it could be a more difficult step, but it's a very necessary step to negotiate a comprehensive and final agreement. But it has to be a wide one. A comprehensive and final agreement would have to cover all aspects of Iran's nuclear program. It has to fulfill what is laid out in the preamble of our joint plan of action with Iran, allowing for a mutually defined enrichment program, but coupled with the absolute commitment by Iran that is there in black and white in the agreement, never to develop any nuclear weapon, and an enrichment program that is defined for practical and peaceful purposes. In the long term, I think this is the question that is very hard to speculate about. What does it mean about the wider relationship between Iran and other countries in the region? I think for the moment we have to see this nuclear deal as a transaction on the nuclear issue, which is in the interests of all the parties concerned. But it is a transaction, not a relationship at this stage. Maybe it can turn into maybe it will provide opportunities for better relationships, but that would depend not only on progress on the nuclear issue, but on changes of policies on the part of Iran on a whole range of other matters that deeply trouble the UK, other Western nations, and so many of the nations in the Gulf. So this is a nuclear transaction. It is not a redefined relationship as things stand today.
Mr. Secretary, earlier this evening, His Royal Highness Prince Turki suggested that Saudi Arabia and the GCC should be included in the negotiations with Iran over its nuclear issue. What is your comment on that, and what can you do to enhance the role of the GCC in the negotiations?
Well, I think we do have to enhance that. We've tried, on the part of the UK during these recent negotiations, we have tried to make sure that our colleagues in the Gulf are well informed and consulted and always given the details of immediately what has happened and so on. But I think the negotiation of a comprehensive and final agreement with Iran on the nuclear issue, the possibility of which has now been opened up, is so difficult but so immensely important for the whole region. And to make it work, it requires the support, the enthusiasm of the entire region. I think it is very important to find new mechanisms of consultation. So I can't speak for all of the E3+3, obviously, or P5+1. We're only one of them. But I think it will be important to, as we try over this next year to reach that agreement, to find additional mechanisms where GCC countries in particular are consulted and brought into the process in a new way. So I will look forward to discussing that with my colleagues, perhaps over this weekend.
Barrier.
Thank you, Minister, for an interesting speech. And my question is, many people believe that to get Iran to come around on all the other issues in the area, and I'm here referring to Syria, Lebanon, etc., Yemen, Bahrain, indeed, it would take a change of soul and mind. How do you propose to do that, Minister? Thank you.
Well, we won't think at the outset that we're able to change the soul. That will be beyond us. That has to change itself if it changes. We won't be able to do that. We are able, I think, to argue with the mind, and to set out the vision of what this region could be, including for Iran, if these problems were resolved. I think we can do that, and Iranian ministers are now in the habit not only of saying they will not develop nuclear weapons, but of presenting the argument as to why they should not, why it would not be in the interests of Iran to do so. This is one way of demonstrating their sincerity about it, but they actually present that argument, with which we agree, of course. Well, it would also be possible to present an argument that it would be in Iran's interest to pursue different policies on all the subjects that you just mentioned. So we can have that argument, but I think in order to win it, it requires a good deal of unity among Western and Arab nations, and I think it requires the continued pressure on Iran to change. That pressure has been very effective. The sanctions that we've imposed on the nuclear issue, there needs to be a constant pressure as well. And then, of course, in the end, it will partly depend on their own rationalization of what is in the interests of their country. But I believe it would be in the interests of their country and of their people to change their policies and work more effectively with their neighbors on quite a long list of issues. So let us make that argument and see where we get to.
Two more questions. The first from Jamal Khashoggi of Saudi Arabia, based here in Bahrain, I think now.
But Mr. Secretary, the vote in the parliament about Syria, did it set the precedent that if an emergency erupts somewhere in the Middle East or the situation in Syria gets worse, again you will take the matter to the parliament, and of course war is not popular there, and they will vote against it. So if anything happens in the Middle East that requires a British immediate engagement, you cannot do something about it because you have a president that you will have to take it back to the parliament. Is that so? Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's not a precedent. Actually, the precedent was set a long time ago, for about a quarter of a century now. We've always had a vote in the British Parliament if there is time to do so before commencing military action. People may not have noticed it before because they've always said yes before. So it hasn't been as dramatic an occasion. But that is what we have done. However, that is not meant to constrain and it does not constrain our ability to act in an emergency or in self-defense or in the defense of our allies or to fulfill our treaty obligations. We do so as soon as possible. When we acted in 2011 with our French colleagues to save Benghazi, when we took immediate military action in Libya, we had the parliamentary vote afterwards. There wasn't time to do that. So the procedure will vary depending on the circumstances. Therefore, one should not come to a general conclusion about that. Also, the outcome will vary depending on the circumstances. And the United Kingdom will continue to maintain, we are maintaining the fourth largest military budget in the world. We have, as we speak, 5,000 troops deployed in Afghanistan. I've just announced today that we will be using we'll be giving logistical support to the French forces going to the Central African Republic. So it would be a mistake to read from one debate and one argument wider conclusions about British foreign policy. We will be a very active player in the world and ready to stand by our allies in many situations in the future.
And finally, from the Kingdom of Bahrain, yes?
Yusuf Mashal, Kingdom of Bahrain. Your Excellency, let me just be so pessimistic a little bit. we have three main issues that is coming in the next year. We have the 9 months that Kerry has put for the Palestinian-Israeli discussions, and we have the Iranian 6 months period, and we have the Syrian Geneva 2. If none of these things really succeed, or if all of them does not really succeed, by, let's say, June next year, are we looking for any military actions or any war in this area? Thank you.
I don't think I will, just before having dinner, declare war on anything or anybody. The grim scenario, the pessimistic scenario in which we fail in all these things, you're quite right to think about. But if our attitude is, we can't do any of those, well, then we'll never get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes it is amazing what diplomacy and pressure together can do. It is amazing. It is, I think many of us who were sitting there in Geneva 2 weeks ago, sitting with the Iranian minister having reached an agreement. 6 months ago, if you had told us we would be sitting there, we would have been very surprised. And so, really, part of my message when I say we have to make the wheels of diplomacy turn even further in 2014 is, yes, it's going to be very hard, and these are three immensely important issues, and you're quite right, if they all go wrong, it is a very bleak situation. But let us surprise ourselves again by how much can be achieved by diplomatic effort and coordinated pressure. And it is within the power of the countries represented in this room at this conference to achieve a remarkable degree of coordinated pressure and diplomatic progress.
Foreign Secretary, thank you very much. I might just begin my thanks by making a short editorial comment inspired by Jamal Khashoggi's question, which is that in those countries of the West that have historically practiced a policy of military deterrence, deterrence very much remains the prerogative of the executive branch, and therefore I think the immediacy of action to which the Foreign Secretary referred can still be one expected in times of crisis from an executive branch, knowing it will ultimately have the support of the parliamentary and legislative authorities. After 7 Manama Dialogues, it was a delight to have Foreign Secretary William Hague here to give the keynote address, and so obviously allying common sense to firm strategic purpose. For your remarks, for your presence here, and for inspiring us to see in 2014 much greater strategic promise, many thanks indeed.